I was home alone one night and decided to browse the deep web. For those of you that don't know, the deep web is a place that you should never visit unless you have the stomach for it. It was the darker side of the web that contains just about every vile thing about humanity that you can imagine. However, unless you have these things called bitcoins, you can't access the darker stuff. But if you find the right sites and have the patience, you may be able to get the bitcoins for free. Anyway, I got curious on this night and thought my mom won't be home for a while. One peek can't hurt. I heard about the deep web by listening to some horror stories narrated on YouTube. The narrators all say they're true, but I have my doubts. In the stories, they all state that for those who don't know how to access the deep web, you need to download a browser called Tor that allows you to browse more anonymously than incognito on Google. So I downloaded Tor and got to work. It wasn't as bad as the story said it was. The worst thing I came across was the black market. While browsing, I came across a link called Gateway to the Shadow Web that read, "Send 0.03 BTC to this web address. You will receive access instructions and the link address in 1 to 2 days." After a great deal of time, I had accumulated enough bitcoins. The next day went by without an email until the day after when I finally received the confirmation email. That night, I went onto the shadow web and did some browsing. I stayed away from the gory sites and the red rooms as much as possible and focused on more forums because I knew what to expect on there. I ran across this forum that had these people chatting about dark things surrounding the chat topic. As I was scrolling, I noticed at the very bottom that some anonymous user left nothing more than a link. Being the curious child that I am, I clicked on it, thinking that it would lead to some article or something on that topic. I can only say that it led to what I feared it would be, a red room. If you don't know, a red room is a live broadcast that you have to sit through the entire thing for. Most red rooms are known for being gory in some way, and most people that don't know this are never prepared. The only way you can exit out of the red room is by cutting off the power source from the computer. If I had known this at the time, I wouldn't be in this mess. I knew what to expect, which is why I wanted so desperately to get out. However, I didn't know how to get out, since I never had any experience with them. It was dark at first, which scared me, but when a masked man appeared on the screen and started talking is when I felt the fear sink in. "Welcome everyone," he said with the light. "I know that you all aren't here to watch me talk all night, so I'll get right to it. Tonight we have a young woman from the streets. She has no idea what an honor it is to be a part of this tonight and how she will be remembered in the future. Although she won't profit from this, some of you will. But before we start betting, I need to go over a few rules, just to ensure that things won't get crazy." Rules? Betting? What? I couldn't even think straight at this point. I was just so bewildered by this. After the masked man went over the rules, I finally understood what was about to begin. This was a betting contest to see who could put this girl through the most torture. The broadcast continued and the betting began. There were chat boxes at the bottom of the screen telling the masked man what to do to the woman. She was a very petite looking woman, so I would imagine that anything they would use to abuse her would hurt her more than someone like me. As the abuse went on, as her screams filled my ears, I was looking for some way to exit the red room because I couldn't bear to watch and do nothing. As I was panicking, I yelled out loud to myself, "This is sick. Once you find a way to exit this nightmare, go straight to the cops." "What did you say?" The screaming stopped, and I was looking at the man in the mask. I don't think he's even in the same room because the room is pitch black, minus the light from the computer screen. It was at this moment that I realized that my mic was on and I couldn't turn it off. The man in the mask said, "What? Can't you handle my show? I was just trying to have fun." I mean, everyone else gets to have fun with their hunting and video games, but I can't. I get to have the 5-0 called on me. A moment of silence went by. "How would you like to be featured on my next show, Tess?" He finally said. I trailed in shock. How in the world did he know my name? Come on, a nosy beautiful brunette like yourself would be bet on instantly at a high price. Oh wait, you look confused. It's okay. You don't need to worry because I have everything under control. Now, hold still while I take your picture. Take my... Oh God. Once I realized that the webcam was on, I immediately covered it, still trying to exit the red room. "Take your hand off the webcam or else I'll come visit you sooner. That's right, I know where you live. You should really consider using better security on your laptop, because I was able to access it quicker than I can my own. I was horrified, so horrified that I wanted to puke, but I complied, and he took the picture. There's a good girl, I heard coming from the screen, while he was humming to pass the time, while he was doing something on his computer. The thought of removing the battery came to my mind immediately. I flipped my laptop over and took out the battery, threw my laptop, and started crying. I had no idea what in the world I had just seen. I didn't eat, sleep, or feel much of anything after that for quite a few days. My experience with the deep web happened almost a week ago, and I'm still on edge. I realized that I was being stalked when I was walking home from the local market 2 nights ago. I saw a black SUV keeping a freakishly close distance to me. I let it slide that night. I know, it sounds stupid, but not last night. I took more detours than I even knew existed on that route to avoid the SUV. When my mom asked, I just told her that there was an incredibly long line at the market. I had the same thing happen to me tonight, and I have no doubt that this is connected to my encounter with the deep web. It was the summer of 2010, and I had been using Reddit for about a week. I had heard from friends it was truly the front page of the internet, and it was also one of the representatives of the infamous deep web. I wasn't your typical noob, and I was subscribed to all the subreddits. I spent a lot of time reading stories, specifically those concerned with horror. I was instantly in love with No Sleep. I'd read hours of stories, after days of reading and hours of almost salivating over the terror and genius of the writers. I decided to make the leap. I was going to make a comment. Now, this honestly isn't a big deal. However, for someone like me, it was terrifying. I felt like it was the first day at a new job. So I began my research to find a story worthy of me actually commenting. I was giddy inside. I ran through my memory considering what stories I had fallen in love with over the last week. It hit me like a set of bricks. There was a story about some man and his wife seeing demons and his plan to see a priest. It wasn't a typical story, and I wanted to make some messed up joke that the only demons he must have seen was his priest molesting him when he was young. I'm not a comedian. I just saw that Reddit is a general consensus that comments are either serious, sarcastic, or sadistic. I did it. I sent the comment and waited for the laughing responses to roll in, for the world to point out and laugh at this man, this poor man. It had been a few weeks, and I just stopped going to Reddit. School was starting soon, and I focused on my studies. I had been looking through my bookmarks, probably in late October. I found the link to that post. No one had said anything. Well, one person did. It was the author. There was over 41 child responses. I was dead laughing. I had really rattled this guy's chin. I had noticed that only he had commented on the post. It was weird because people are typically all over these posts. I opened up to see all the responses. Surely, other people had replied. I was wrong. Every response was from the author. Each one had revealed something more horrible than the last. He knew my name, my email, my mother's name, my father's name, and my address. Every response was a piece of information about me. The responses had gotten more private, and I finally was broken down to about 40 comments. I was frozen, terrified. How did this guy know all this information? I almost remember crying. I was so scared. I'm only 16. I was terrified that something might happen to me or my loved ones. Then there was a link. I had lost my dog about a month ago. I live in a suburban area, and there was a heavy forest there that finally led to a major highway. It was possible that my dog had been hit by a car, and carelessly someone just scooted his carcass into the woods. I was wrong to assume that, and wish that was the case. This link wasn't a normal link. It had numbers and letters and no regular or linear order. It ended in onion. I thought to myself, and said it almost chuckling, it's the deep net. I ran a virtual machine that had a completely encrypted hard drive, and I had a pretty strong VPN on. I opened up my VM and ran Tor. I opened up the hidden wiki and searched to see if the link had matched any of the ones on there. Nope. This man was sending me somewhere private, or maybe somewhere secret. I should have stopped right there. I opened up the link. I never want to see what I saw there ever again. An all-black website appeared, and in the center was a photo of my dog inside of what looked like a factory. Above the photo, it said, "Click me." I did. Then a video replaced the photo. A man walked into frame wearing a mask, not just a regular mask, but the same mask I had worn for Halloween 2 days prior. He had his hands behind his back, like he was holding something. It was the same background of a factory. It was in black and white, and then an old front popped up at the bottom. "Good afternoon, David." He slowly revealed what was behind his back. It was my dog, slaughtered, and what seemed to be knives stuck inside his body. It was fresh. He had been bleeding as the video was being recorded. I was crying, but I was so terrified at the same time, I didn't even notice the tear falling all over my keyboard. The video then swapped to what seemed to be a meat processing center, and there was a woman this time, and she looked like she was screaming. She was naked, and had very graphic things written across her chest in blood. He then put her through a meat processor. Then the man looked like he was coughing up black liquid, and sprayed it all over the floor, and finally he fell over. The last frame I won't ever forget. There was a long lanky figure, and it looked like its skin was all black, except for 2 large blood-red eyes. I didn't tell anyone. Nothing ever happened to me, but I haven't been on Reddit till now. The moral of the story is, don't mess with people on here, because you never know who they actually are. It was around 11 o'clock at night, and I had just finished studying for finals. At the time, I was a 22-year-old junior in college, and to be honest, I absolutely hated it. I had zero motivation to go to classes, other than the fact my parents were paying for me to go, and basically forcing me to get my degree. By the time I finished studying for the night, simply because I couldn't take it anymore, or I would have gone insane, I decided to browse the internet, like any normal college student does at night, when trying to clear his or her mind. Everything started out like usual. I'd browse a couple of websites, looking at expensive things I couldn't buy because I was a broke college student. About 30 minutes had passed, and I started to get bored. I came across a couple of deep web narration stories on YouTube, and began to become intrigued. After watching a couple, I decided, what the heck? There's no way these stories can be true, simply because they sounded too far-fetched. I knew for a fact that the deep web existed, but seriously questioned these stories. I decided to do a little research on how to access it in order to prove to myself that these stories were bull. I'm not going to go into detail on how I finally got into the deep web, simply because I want to strongly forbid anyone from going into it, at least to the part of the dark web that I went to. When I first got on, I saw a couple of sites where you could buy drugs, black market guns, and other weapons. Also a few other things I won't mention. I don't exactly remember how, but after browsing a few different sites, I came across this one page that was completely dark at first, but it soon filled up with these extremely graphic videos of murders. And I'm not talking about murder scenes, I'm talking about actual murders taking place with point-of-view footage, almost as if it was the same person in each video and they were filming it with a GoPro or some other camera that was strapped to their body. I only watched one of the videos, simply because I couldn't stomach anymore. First one was this guy behind the camera stalking this girl walking on a city street at night. At first he was walking at a normal pace behind her. Then, all of a sudden, he sprinted at her. The camera went dark for a second, because I assumed he had ran up on her and her body was blocking the lens. It sounded like he had her hand around her mouth and she was trying to scream. Finally, I could see what was going on again, but to be honest, I'm not really sure if I wanted to. The girl had duct tape around her mouth and was lying on the ground by a dumpster in what looked to be a back alley. At first I thought it was fake, like some dumb amateur movie or YouTube skit, but what happened next completely destroyed that theory. I saw the girl's eyes suddenly get filled with pure fear, even more than she already was. Next, the guy got on top of her and pulled out this massive shiny knife and stuck it directly into the girl's throat. The sound that came from her when that happened was absolutely terrifying, and I can still hear it in my head to this day. He sat there on top of her, sticking the knife further and further into her neck, twisting and pulling it from side to side. There was absolutely no way this was fake or edited with special effects. It was just too up close and real. The girl seemed to be dead in just seconds. Then, the person behind the camera just picked up her body and tossed it into the dumpster, closing the lid afterward. What kind of animal would do such a thing? There was at least 10 more videos on this site, but absolutely no way I was watching any more. I ended up hopping up and running to the bathroom and then throwing up all over the place. When I came back to my computer, I said to myself, I'm done with this. I've seen enough, and I'm going to bed. Before I could exit out, a message popped up on the screen that said, now that you're a viewer, it's time that you join the movement. I responded back and said, what movement? Within seconds, another message came up saying, it's up to you to make the next video for our website. At that point, I thought to myself, are they asking me to video and kill someone? I asked them, and they said, we're not asking you, we're telling you. I told them there was no way in hell I was doing or having any involvement in this website, and that the people behind this are sick and deserve to die. Within now seconds, they said, now Jake, why would you say such a terrible thing? How did they know my name? My heart began to pound out of my chest, but I played it cool, and I said, you all can manipulate and scare other people on here, but not me. You low-life scum can go jump off a building. Goodbye. I exited out and shut off my computer immediately. I might have played it off to them in the message, but deep down inside I was scared to death. About a minute later, I got a text from a random number, and it read, we're coming, Jake. You don't want to make our next video? Well, you're going to be in our next video. Then they listed my full address to both my parents' house and my on-campus apartment I lived in currently. I instantly felt sick and had no idea what to do. My roommate who lived with me was already out of town and visiting his family because he had finished his finals earlier that day. I laid in bed all night, not sleeping a minute, just expecting those guys running that website to break in at any moment. Luckily, morning came, and I started to become relieved because I had an early morning class and could get somewhere with people around. When I was walking to class, I started to notice this white van slowly driving up near me. I freaked out a little bit, but thought I was just being paranoid, and I just shook it off. Then, the next thing I knew, the van sped up and drove up onto the sidewalk, almost running me over. And then two guys hopped out, wearing hoodies, and they both had on the mask from the V for Vendetta movie. Before I could run, one of the guys tackled me, and before I knew it, there were three guys attacking me. I was on the ground. Meanwhile, they were aggressively kicking me in the ribs and in the head. Next, they picked me up and started to carry me to the van. I thought to myself, if I don't fight, I'm going to be dead soon. I started kicking and yelling and putting up a fight. The next thing I knew, one of the guys pulled out a knife and stabbed me once in the leg and once in the stomach. You may be wondering if there were any people around. The answer is yes. Some girls nearby freaked out and ran, while others probably just assumed it was a fraternity prank. Luckily, a few seconds later, I heard a police siren. The three guys dropped me on the sidewalk, and then hopped in their van and peeled out. The cop car stopped for a minute, and one officer hopped out to help me and call an ambulance. The other sped off in their squad car after the van. I got taken to the hospital, and thankfully wasn't stabbed in any vital areas. My parents came, and were in absolute shock over what had happened. I had to explain everything to them and the police on how this all started. Apparently the cops chased the guys in the van for a while, before finally running them off the road into a tree. As the cops approached the van at gunpoint, they allegedly heard 4 gunshots, and when they finally got to the van, it looked as if all 4 of them had committed suicide. I never found out the exact identity of these guys, but the cops told me they all 4 lived 2 states over from where I lived. God only knows how they found me. It's been about a year since this experience, and I'm now a senior in college. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what I saw that night online, and I hope and pray that those guys were the only ones behind that website. If I could offer one piece of advice, do not go looking for trouble on the deep web, because if you're not careful, trouble will find you, and you might not be as lucky as I was.